what a pleasure it is to be joined by Brendan Shanahan, 3-time Stanley Cup champion, Olympic gold medalist, and Hockey Hall of Famer in 2013. Brendan, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure, Pierre.
All right, how does a guy from Mimico, Ontario become the president of the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Well, that's, yeah, it's, there's a few steps in between there, but that wasn't lost on me when Toronto had called and talked to me about coming in and doing this job, just what it would mean to my family, not just my immediate family, my wife and kids, but my father's passed away. He passed away in 1990, but my 3 older brothers and their kids and my neighbors and high school friends and we all grew up Toronto Maple Leaf fans, and as you know, in lots of hockey cities, for a hockey family, sort of crowding around the TV on a Saturday night for Hockey Night in Canada is like your tribal moment. So it was very meaningful to me, and I still appreciate it every day.
I look at your career, and one of the things I really admire about all the things you accomplished, you learned along the way. You learned about a lot of things along the way. You were 2nd overall pick. Your number was retired, obviously, with the London Knights, so you've had a lot of success. So let's start here, Toronto. Yeah. What have you learned about your job, being the president of the Leafs so far?
Well, it's sometimes, it's hard to sometimes describe, and that's, I guess what I've learned is that it can change every day. And, like I will have people say, give me your typical day, and or tell me exactly what you do, and it really does sort of evolve over time, or depending on the week, depending on the time of year. But I like that about the job. It's not all hockey on the ice. It's lots of other things as well. But first and foremost, when I got here and sort of was evaluating, assessing what we had to do, first and foremost is the hockey team and the product on the ice. And you can get caught up, letting the tail wag the dog if you start thinking about. I won't even get into specifics, but you start thinking about a variety of subjects that go around running an organization. When first and foremost we had to improve the product on the ice, and it's always a work in progress for all NHL teams, not just us. And anytime at any point in the season or in any particular season, it's really just a snapshot. There's no general manager or team president in the NHL that looks at their team on a given day and says, this is it, we're done. We're done evolving, we're done growing, we're done making changes. So it's a fluid job, and I enjoy it very much how it changes from day to day.
I'll never forget, I was doing a playoff series in Tampa, and I was at the airport, and my phone rang, and it said your name on it. So I picked it up, and you said to me, Pierre, I have a plan. It was your first year doing it. What's the plan?
Well, I mean, the first year was a difficult year because I didn't want to jump in and sort of make guesses or just take follow through with actions on the advice of other people. So I think that to sit back and be patient and really evaluate things yourself was advice I got from a lot of people that I respect. But it is sometimes hard to be patient to do that. And the plan was really at the time was exactly what I just sort of mentioned before. It was to fix the product on the ice. And in the NHL now with the salary cap too, like it's not just about making trades. It's which I don't do those. My general manager does. But even when a general manager wants to make changes, you have to. Unlike other jobs where you say, I don't like this, our current principal, so we're going to move him out and bring this one in. It doesn't move that quickly for the NHL. You have to, when you want to make a trade, you have to make sure that he's the right player for you, but also that there's a fit. You've got to find a home for your player, and that player has to fit. So the days in the 80s and 90s where people were just swapping players and you could totally transform your team overnight are somewhat gone. And very rare now do you see those big blockbuster trades with several players moving all at once. So it was a bit of a process, and I tried not to listen, especially in the beginning. I tried not to listen to people like yourself because it made me angry because you weren't saying anything that wasn't true. quite frankly, the product I think that we had at the time, I used to say to people, like, if I were doing these shows, I'd probably be thinking worse or saying worse. And it's really hard to be patient. And you can't really ask other people to be patient for you. But over time, we started to accumulate some good players. We started to get things in order. We started to accumulate good people, good staff, and that's also a big key, as you know. It's the ability to try to not just improve your team, but sustain it over time is a goal that we all have. And that comes from having the ability to hire good people, which our owners have been extremely cooperative for me in surrounding myself with really good people.
I'm glad you brought that up. One of the fascinating hires was your ability to get Lou Lamoriello, the man that drafted you in New Jersey, to come to Toronto. How did you do that?
It just worked out. The timing. It wasn't a planned thing. It was. I was as surprised as anybody, really, when there was a small window in time where he was available and intrigued with the opportunity. We had some good young people like Mark Hunter and Kyle Dubas that were sort of learning the job, and I just thought that he would just be such an important impact for the organization. For what we needed at the time, and the foundation and the stability and all those things you're trying to build from the ground up. He was a great guy for us, and but yeah, it was just luck. I didn't go into that season thinking that he would be available, but I was certainly had my eye out when we made a change at the end of that season. We made changes to our management. And we didn't hire anybody right away, but I was certainly looking for somebody. I was relatively new, and Kyle Dubas and Mark Hunter were my two assistant general managers, and they were still relatively new. I was looking for somebody that had some experience.
How hard was it not to renew Lou?
No, I think all of those decisions are difficult ones, and it's. I think that without going into all the nuances of what you draw into your decision, I think the more important thing is you have relationships with people, and sometimes, and I remember it even as a player, sometimes you have relationships with people and they tell you things that you might not agree with or you don't want to hear, and that's sometimes just the part of being the boss or being in charge. And we're not in charge forever, but when we are, we're expected to make those calls, and it's like similar to players, same thing with management. It's about anticipating and growing your own people. So I just thought that the timing was right, but it's never easy to have those conversations.
So I talked about how I'm fascinated by all the things you've learned in your career. I really am, because I've watched you and studied you, and I think you've learned a lot along the way. What did you learn from the 1998 Olympics with your team losing?
Well, that one confused me, actually, because I remember, for those who don't remember, the 98 Olympics, Canada was a favorite, and we were actually really playing well. Like, we had really smoked the United States team, Sweden. We were just really humming along, and we ran into a hot goalie in Dominic Hasek in the semifinal game. And I think they were winning 1-0, and we maybe tied it up with our goalie pulled. We went through overtime and didn't score. We were expected to win gold, but then we found ourselves in a shootout. And I remember the coaches sort of getting in a pack and huddling together. And at that time, we didn't have shootouts in the NHL, so it's not like we had like 4 or 5 moves in our bag. We had breakaways, obviously, but that's a different thing. It's not something that we really practiced. So all of a sudden the coaches are in a huddle and we're saying, oh my God, we have a shootout, like, to survive. And I remember thinking at the time, like, as they came back and were sort of rattling off the numbers, who was going to shoot and the order in which they were going to shoot, they kept saying the names, and I kept on thinking, like, say my name, please say my name. And I was the 5th guy, the 5th and final guy. And immediately my mind goes to, like, you don't care how you win it, just so long as you win it. But I'm a very positive thinker, and you want to have an impact, and you want to be important to the team, and so you're thinking, like, okay, like, I'm going to have a chance to win this thing. Be ready. And when it did come my turn, they had scored 1 goal and we hadn't scored any. So it didn't work out. I remember as I watched each of our guys miss and miss, I had a move in the back of my head that I had done like in the shootout in the All-Star game that year on Ole Kolzig.
In Vancouver, right?
Yeah, where I was a shooter, so I think every goalie thought I was going to shoot, and I'd come in with speed and just sort of like just do like it's not even like a fake so much as like a flex. That's a wrong way to put it, but just like sort of like a little shake, and the goalie would drop. I'd step around and put in the empty net, and I'd done it to Cujo in a breakaway thing a couple years before that. He said, "That's a really good move for you." Cujo was our goalie in practice, or our goalie for the Blues. Mm-hmm. So that's a really good move for you because we all expect you to shoot 5-hole, and so we're all going to drop as soon as we see you, move your shoulders. So I had this move in my head, but as we got closer and I started to see all these guys not have success, I started to think to myself like, ooh, maybe just go 5-hole. Maybe just keep it safe and don't look stupid. And then I had this thought in my head actually as I was like skating out on the ice, because if the Czech guy before me scores, I don't even get to shoot. And I got mad at myself as I'm skating on the ice, and I just said, look, to myself, like, this is why they picked you. They picked you because you're supposed to have a little, courage in this situation. So you have a responsibility to do what you think is the right move. Mm-hmm. I didn't do it well. I didn't execute it well even to begin with, but I did try to do that. And I remember just sort of making like a little bit of a move, and Hasek just froze. He didn't even bite one bit. Right. And like it came to the point where I was almost like waiting for some net, and he just was with me the whole way. He was almost mirroring the puck with his gloves, and I thought to myself, like, I'm about to skate behind the net. Like, there's just nothing there. And I shot the puck sort of knowing, like, he read this, and like I said, I don't think it was my best effort. But it confused me at the time because I remember, being really sad and obviously and apologizing to the country for not coming through in that moment, and turning this into a way longer story than I thought it would be. But for a few days, we go to the closing ceremonies, then we got to get all the way back to North America and series of flights. And I remember thinking, like, why did this happen? This doesn't happen. You expect success, you want success, and I went home and I wrote on a piece of paper. I said to my wife, I think I know what this means. It was too easy. We couldn't just show up at the first Olympics and just win a gold. We wouldn't have appreciated this. This is about like getting kicked hard and stung hard for 2002. And so I went and wrote on a piece of paper that, I'm going to make the team in 2002. We're going to win the gold medal. And I sealed it up and I put it in an envelope, and I hid it in my desk. And luckily 4 years later, I was able to be on that team. I was not one of the main players. I was a fourth line guy. And I remember I broke my thumb in the second or third game. And I just thought, like, there's no way. I was still thinking about 98. There's no way I'm not playing. And so we were able to have success, and I went home and took the letter out of my desk and showed my wife. But
you accepted responsibility, and I think that was one of the things. You accepted the role that was created for you by Pat Quinn and the coaching staff in 02. Is that fair to say?
Oh, I played on lots of Team Canadas where you took what was available, and it wasn't my first time. And that can evolve over time. I remember in the 96 World Cup, like Steve Yzerman was a healthy scratch in the early games, and then got in a game and scored a late game winning goal, and then suddenly became our and wasn't complaining about his role, and suddenly by the time the tournament ended, he was our most important player. I think even in 2002, Jerome McGinley was a young up-and-coming player.
He wasn't even at the camp to start.
Wasn't even invited to the camp, and ends up scoring 2 goals in the gold medal game. So when you play for any team, and especially if you have an opportunity to play for Canada where you've got so many great players, you take whatever role they give you, and you do whatever role. It could change over the tournament, or you could just be a fourth line momentum changer, banger, and you might be a 50 goal scorer in the NHL, but for those 2 weeks, this is what you do.
What did 97 and 98 teach you as a player in terms of commitment to win back-to-back cups?
Well, I think they're both different. I think in 97, I think the exercise sort of humbles you a little bit, because, even now, we all try to build these teams, and you have to be calculated and sort of like how you build a team from the ground up. But then what I realized when I played 97 is, wow, there's a lot of luck involved as well. And there's a break here in the second round, or a break in game 3 of the third round, where you start to look back and say, if that didn't hit the post, or if this goal wasn't called back, or whatever, if we didn't catch this break, we might not be standing here holding the cup in the final. So I learned that sometimes you win, even though they hand out the cup at the end of the 4th round, sometimes you win the cup in game 2 of round 1. Sometimes you win the cup in game 7 of round 2. And so it's humbling in that regard. I'd say the greatest lesson in winning the back-to-back was for people that would say, you guys have won, what about complacency? And I'd say, well, obviously you think about it completely backwards, because when you win, it's like a bear or an animal tasting meat for the first time. Like, berries and shrubs no longer are good enough. Once you win, it's just the opposite. You become like that is, you've tasted it now. You've seen what it's like. You've seen what it takes. You've seen how far you can push beyond what you thought were your limits. You've seen your teammates come to your support. You've come to their support, and you want right back at it.
You were not a meek player. You were robust. I think it's fair to say that. How nasty was Colorado, Detroit in those days?
It was great. And the interesting thing about that rivalry, it was the two teams really did dislike each other. And it doesn't mean that we didn't respect them. You can respect somebody and still not like them. We really didn't like them, and they didn't like us. But what was more interesting is that, with all due respect, there were other great teams in the league at the time, New Jersey and Dallas and several others. But it was, you could argue that we were the 2 best teams in the league, that, in any given night, there might have been between 12 and 16 future Hall of Famers on the ice. And when I think about the game on March 26, 1997, which was the really sort of a galvanizing moment for the Detroit Red Wings, we were down 5-3 in the third period. People remember the brawls, and they remember all the fights of the game, but we came back and won that game 6-5 in overtime. So it's probably the most, even now, you'll sometimes see clips on it, like on this date, whatever, many years ago. And I've seen some highlights of the game, and I've seen some repeats of it. It's still maybe the most entertaining game I've ever participated in, that if you're a hockey fan, it sort of touches all of the bases.
2002, your coach was Scotty Bowman. That's the last game he ever coached. Carolina, you win the cup. The night before, I had dinner with him at the Grosse Pointe Yacht Club, and he told me he was going to retire the next day if they won, and I couldn't tell anybody. Did you know he was going to retire after that game?
No, if you look, while we're celebrating on the ice, none of us knew that Scotty was going to retire. While we're all celebrating on the ice, and he's coming up to us one by one, and he's hugging us, and he's telling us in those moments. And so, we were all shocked, and then you'd go and hug a player after talking to Scotty, and you'd be yelling and screaming, and then he'd say, "Did you hear Scotty's retiring?" And we'd say, "Yeah." Oh my God, anyway, and then you'd go and hug another guy, and so it started to make our way around on the ice. And the great thing about Scotty was sort of from that point on too is I think there's a part of us, we all wanted to talk to him more. We certainly wanted to hear the Pittsburgh stories and the Montreal stories, and we were being coached by somebody that was currently in the Hall of Fame. But Scotty doesn't talk to his players, and I think that's by design. I think that's how he was taught, how he learned from the Toe Blakes of the world, that there's a certain distance you keep from your players. So since then, he used to come down to the dressing room, and he was like chatty, and he's very conversational, as you would know, but we didn't. And we all wanted to have that. We all wanted to, get more back from him. And I laugh sometimes when people talk about like communication. I'd say, like, for all of us, even our captain Steve Yzerman, you might go 3, 4, 5 months without, having a one-on-one conversation with Scotty, which might even involve just like grabbing a coffee, like in the dressing room, saying, "Hey, how was your Christmas?" Like that just didn't occur. And he would speak to us as a group, but very, very seldom did he sort of use his voice on us one-on-one. Usually when it was a one-on-one with Scotty, it wasn't for a good reason. It wasn't. You weren't getting called in to be told that you were playing really well.
That's right. So after Scotty left, Dave Lewis was there for a short time.
Yeah.
And then Mike Babcock came in,
Yep.
and you played for Mike. And what did you learn from Mike that led you to believe that he could help you turn the Toronto Maple Leafs around?
Well, I think that Mike, I think even in Detroit, even with that veteran group, after Scotty, there was a little bit of a letdown, and we weren't as sharp, we weren't as disciplined, and we weren't as structured as we were under Scotty. And that's not a knock at Dave Lewis. I think that was just a direct result of, after having Scotty there for 10 years now, there's the guys maybe sort of ease back a little bit. So I thought what Mike did was he brought back that structure and that discipline. He was certainly somebody that had a game plan, had a very detailed game plan, and he was a communicator. And so going from a coach like Scotty, who never communicated, to now going to a guy like Mike, who communicated with you every day, was, for me and for a lot of the players, you like to know where you stand. And so I thought that he had done a really good job in sort of pulling that team back together and giving that team structure, and giving that team a game plan again. So I used to kid around with him though sometimes, because he's I said to him once, Mike, if I have a good game and someone asks you to compliment me, could you please not compliment me, because they hurt my feelings. Because he'd say like, oh yeah, Shanahan had 3 goals tonight for a guy that old and that slow. That's amazing, and he played really well. Yeah. And we used to kick that around and laugh about it. And I think that I always at the time appreciated again that he was a guy where, in contrast to Scotty, both brilliant coaches, both guys that Scotty's in the Hall of Fame. Mike will probably be in the Hall of Fame, but one of them we were going to Barry Smith, like, Barry, what does Scotty want from me? From Mike, we heard it directly, and that was sometimes a good thing too.
How hard was it to travel to Arizona and fire Mike?
Yeah, that's not the good part of the job, for sure. And that's I think people that do this job, there are a lot of good days, and then there are bad days where you have to make a decision like that. And it's based on how things are going in that moment, and how things are going with the team at that time, and whether or not you think that they're going to be a part of the solution, or if you have to look elsewhere. So part of the job, not a fun part of the job.
One of the things that I think you did that really helped hockey was during the nuclear winter 2004-2005, you had the Shanahan Summit, so-called Shanahan Summit, to try to identify what needed to change with the rules. I thought it was really progressive. At that time, did you know that there were issues with coaches around the league that some players will bring up down the road in terms of verbal abuse or potential physical abuse or things like that? Did you know any of that stuff at that time?
I don't know that any of us would have put it that way at the time. I think at the time we were thinking, when we met, it was players, it was coaches, it was TV executives, it was managers, referees. It was all the people that sort of were responsible for the product on the ice. So our focus at the time was the game had really stopped. In some respects, a lot of players started to think the game was becoming less and less entertaining. So that was really the focus on that meeting. And I always, the meeting was set up in a way in which it was confusing to me why managers just met with managers and refs just met with refs and players just met with players. And nobody ever shared each other's experience with each other. And I remember even being in the meeting and a coach and a manager and some players. And I generally just sat back in the meeting and let everyone sort of take over. But they'd be going down the road with a certain idea, a certain rule, and a referee would speak up and add his perspective that would tell us that this was the complete wrong way, wrong direction to be going on the road. So having everybody there was really helpful, and that was really the focus of that. And the group had no teeth. Like we weren't put together by the league in any way. We were in a work stoppage, and it was just a matter of what happened was that particular year there was a really great Hall of Fame class that went in, and I thought that they all had these great suggestions about the game and where the game should be going, and at the time I don't even know if there certainly wasn't Twitter, or I don't even know where you'd find these things, but it was in the newspaper the next day, and then it was gone. And I just thought, like, these are all great ideas, but they don't ever get to stick because we don't ever talk with the other side. And like I said, there was a lockout going on. We had nothing to do with like the business of hockey or the lockout. It was just a bunch of people that loved the game that knew when we did come back, we were going to have to be better.
It is better. I think you would agree the game is much better. You were a big part of that, so I tip my hat to you. I think about it now, and you were as nasty as there was when it came to play, and I say that as a compliment, you know that. Are you worried that maybe a little bit of the physicality is coming out of hockey?
Well, I would say that there's probably, and I think you could probably back this up with just the data that's available to you. There's probably more hitting in hockey now than there was back then. So the physicality comes in a different way. The players are smarter. They're in better shape. They're faster. You can't slow them down with hooking and holding as much. So the hitting is, like I said, the shifts are shorter because they're intelligent. They know now not to extend a shift. So they're always out there with energy. They come with speed. They finish. Everyone finishes their checks. So I would say that we all would love to have like physicality in that sort of complete package. When of a player, and I remember talking to Mark Hunter when he was scouting for us and saying to him, because he was very entrenched. He was coming from junior hockey, really knew the game and the players well coming up, and I described a couple of players that could really contribute to the team and play the game really well, but also had that physical edge, and asked him, like, can you find us some of these guys in the draft? And one of the things he had said to me was with some of the rule changes in junior hockey that fewer and fewer players were playing that style. There are guys in our league right now that play that style that are very good at it. They're good players, and they also bring a physical edge. They're sort of that Cam Neely package, but in the 90s there were one of those on every team. Now there's sort of, I don't know exactly how many, but they're not very many. So I think physicality is always going to play a role in hockey. I think it can take on different forms. I think that grit takes on different forms. Igor Larionov, is not a big guy. They call him the professor, and yet he's one of the grittiest.
Can't believe he fought Forsberg.
Mentally tough people I've ever played with. So I think that takes on different forms.
One last one for you. Thank you for being so generous with your time. Do you ever allow yourself, because you've hoisted the cup 3 times, do you ever allow yourself to think about what a Stanley Cup here in Toronto would be like?
Well, that's the job. I mean, we all do. We all wherever, you know, they think whoever's working in any organization around the NHL thinks about it. So I'm no different in that. Absolutely, that's having that sort of like visualization in the back of your mind is it's great to have, and it's sometimes fun to on a drive to think about some of those things that are sort of at the end of the finish line, but then we all just go back to, you know, what do we have to do today? What do we have to do to get ourselves better? What do we have to do to make ourselves one of those teams that has the potential to do this? And I say to people all the time here in Toronto as well, because, you know, once, you know, when the team was rebuilding, it was sort of in some ways, I remember somebody saying to me once, a fan coming up to me and saying, you know, we support the rebuild of this team, and it's just going to be so much fun when this team is good and contending, you know, a contending team. It's just going to be so much more peaceful in the city. And I said, no, it's the opposite. Right. It's like from when I look at some of these other cities and teams that have won, there's a team this year that will be unhappy with their staff at a certain moment. They'll be unhappy with their defense at a certain moment. They'll be unhappy with their power play or their offense at a certain moment. There'll be a team that thinks all those things in a snapshot during the season that will win the Stanley Cup. Yeah. And we make the, you know, we make the mistake of seeing a team at the end where it all comes together and thinking that it just went beautifully for them all year long. The highs and especially the lows are sort of those lessons, in those moments are the lessons that help you hopefully have the good fortune of winning a Stanley Cup.
Thank you for your time, and Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Really good seeing you, Brandon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you.